Hey, this is Doug with Design 8 Studio. Join me on a brief little journey of a very satisfying project, making something I needed with my LowRider version 3, mostly printed CNC, which is a free open source plan provided by Ryan of V1 Engineering. You can get the plans as well as join the forum and have access to great resources at v1e.com. The forum is at v1e.com/forum. Off camera, I started this project and then thought, might as well turn the camera on and get this out there for you to see. I made a user error in setting up the cuts. Those setups were done in SLCAM. And when I did these pockets, I just absent-mindedly set them to cut full depth when I actually needed them to only cut about half depth. And I happened to catch it when the first pocket went one layer too deep. I thought, I realized what I've done. So I went back to SLCAM and outputted a corrected copy of the pockets file. And it so happened that I had paused the cut job that went one layer too deep on the first pocket, and a way that had that one layer extra deep not quite completely pocketed out. So since that one layer too deep wasn't too far gone, I could still use the salvaged plywood. I just needed to go ahead and finish out that pocket. So I created another pockets fix file that had that one of the two pockets that needed finished at that extra deep layer to go ahead and get finished. And then I ran the profile cuts job that you see happening now. I love to reclaim wood that somebody else thought was worthless. I just hate wasting wood, hate wasting resources. And so this was a chunk of plywood that someone had left outside after a job at our church and just was left for throwaway. And I've made several projects out of the plywood that I got from that throwaway. And I think this is probably the last one. The little bits remaining won't be useful for anything. This plywood did suffer a little bit of weather, and so you can tell it's darkened from that weather. And it's not good for anything where aesthetics really matter, but for shop tools where the appearance doesn't matter, it's the functionality that matters. It's still got great life left in it. Sometimes when you do cutting like this, where you're just wanting to get it done and you're using aggressive settings with a deep depth of cut, and if the plywood is old and brittle, you can have some tear out and splintering, which I did suffer some of that on this project. But I think you'll find in the end that that's not a problem. And so one of the two profile cuts is now complete, and we're heading over to do the second profile cut. There was another piece off of this last remaining scrap of plywood that I cut off using just using a table saw. I've already cut off a piece that's going to serve as the base. And so as we move through this project, you'll quickly realize what it is. My LowRider is operating right now with a 4-point-something millimeter depth of cut. I'm using a 1/4 inch end mill 2-flute upcut end mill bit, and as you saw, I have my Makita router set somewhere between 3 and 4 on the dial, a little bit closer to 4, I think, at this point. My dust collection is working great. I've been so impressed with the performance of the dust shoe that Ryan designed. One thing I'll mention is you see a red kind of a C-clip on the back side of where the hose attaches to my dust collection, and that is a super neat quick release feature. I can snap my dust hose in, my dust collection hose, I can snap it in, and then just by pushing that quick release red C-clip looking thing, I can detach my dust collection hose to use it for cleaning up after the project. And this is something that I've been meaning to get shared out on Printables, and hopefully I'll be able to have time to get that shared out. My design studio now consists of 7 3D printers and 3 graphics printers. All 3 of the graphics printers are made by HP. One of them is a large format inkjet that can print on paper rolls that come in a 24-inch wide format, and then a regular sized inkjet color HP and a regular sized black and white laser. And then in addition to that, I now have an array of woodworking tools, including my latest acquire, which was to buy an affordable bandsaw that came with only a 1/2 horsepower motor, and upgrading it by buying a new 1.5 horsepower motor and swapping the two. And that was a whole journey. I'll probably cover that in a different video. And then I also have a large CNC controlled laser machine that I purchased as opposed to building, and it's a tremendous addition to my design studio. And then I currently have 2 V1 Engineering designed LowRider 3s. One of them carries a router. That's the one you see me using here. And the other one carries a plasma torch. And I've covered that extensively in a video series here on my channel. If you've not checked out my LowRider 3 based plasma CNC rig, you really ought to watch that series. It uses a touchscreen laptop. I bought a used affordable Acer laptop with a touchscreen on eBay, and it has Linux CNC installed on that laptop. And then the interface between the laptop and the machine consists of a breakout board made by Mesa Electronics, and there's another PCB from Mesa Electronics that provides support for automatic torch height control. Alright, so now I've brought the CNC cut pieces over to my DIY scratch-built router table, and I'm using 2 different bits here to process these pieces. Right now I'm using a flush trim pilot bit in which a guide bearing at the top follows the cut contour of the CNC cut piece, and the bottom part where the blade is knocks off any burrs or lip protruding at the bottom and gets a nice finished cut. And so after I finish getting that treatment done, I will swap the flush trim bit out for a roundover bit, and in the second pass of processing these pieces, I will knock the hard corner off of the pieces so that I have nice rounded over edges on the user facing parts of these CNC cut pieces. Here you see me completing the switch to the roundover bit, and now I'm getting ready to go back in and knock those corners down. In addition to the mouse hole, so to speak, at the back for dust control, there is also a 3D printed plastic housing out of view right now down underneath the router plate, and it closes off where dust and chips would normally be able to escape out of the bottom, and it has an air hose attachment to it, and so I'm capturing chips and dust now from both the back on the top and also from down below. I basically have a 4-inch dust collection hose split, and one of the splits goes to the top on the back side, and the other split comes into this DIY router table from the left side, hooks onto that 3D printed plastic adapter, which then swings around and attaches to the router itself. I think I've produced a video, and I've also shared the design for that on PRINTABLES.com. By the way, the router in use here in my DIY router table is just a trim router. It's the exact same Makita model that I use on my LowRider. I've got, I think, 2 or 3, I may have 3 of these trim routers by Makita. They are a tremendous tool. And so I've got one kind of semi-permanently mounted here, one kind of semi-permanently mounted in my LowRider, and I think I've got a third one just for handheld use. But they're just one of the most useful things you can have in your shop. Also, just a quick correction. A minute ago I said that it was attached to the router. It's actually attached to the base, which clearly you could see a moment ago that I was able to bring the router down out of the router table and you didn't see any 3D printed attachment, and that's because it's attached to the base itself. And of course the base is attached to the router plate. Now over to my DIY scratch-built wall-mounted saw to cut the dowel and where some other pieces were also cut. An interesting tidbit, that power saw is mounted to those pipes using some 608 bearings via 3D printed plastic parts that were based on Ryan's design for the LowRider version 2. This massive roll of shop towels is paper-based and affordable and works great. They're phenomenal for all kinds of shop rag usage. I'll put a link in the description to the listing that I purchased from on Amazon. And because the mounting grooves are on a diagonal, this stand can be used either flat like this or wall mounted. Once again, this is Doug with Design 8 Studio, and we've got quite a few really neat projects on hand, some having already been completed, but the video hasn't been edited yet. And so I encourage you to please click like and consider subscribing. And until the next video, I wish you happy making.